causing some problems this morning. Second practice is now underway. We'll have more on all those stories coming up in the next half an hour, Tina.
Holly, thank you. Ayahuasca is a potent hallucinogenic tea that's been popular in the Amazon for years, but is becoming increasingly available at retreats.
Injuries in the incident. He returned to Manchester this morning and will be checked by the club doctors. Now, Aguero has scored 7 goals in 8 matches already this season, and he's on the brink of becoming the club's record goal scorer. So we're watching that story closely. Meanwhile, Arsenal made the most of some questionable goalkeeping to make it 2 wins out of 2 in the Europa League last night. They beat Bate Borisov 4-2 in Belarus. Meanwhile, Everton only managing a 2-2 draw at home to Apollon Limassol. And Luke Gale was the hero for Castleford as they booked their place in Rugby League's grand final, beating St Helens 23-22. Gale only had his appendix removed 2 weeks ago. He played with a corset following the operation, scoring 15 of their 23 points and kicked the winner into extra time. That's some going. Now, Championship leader Lewis Hamilton took 6th place in first practice for the Malaysian Grand Prix this morning. Max Verstappen was quickest, but heavy rain and dangerous driving conditions are causing some problems this morning. Second practice is now underway. We'll have more on all those stories coming up in the next half an hour, Tina.
Holly, thank you. Ayahuasca is a potent hallucinogenic tea that's been popular in the Amazon for years, but is becoming increasingly available at retreats across Europe. It can be extremely dangerous, sometimes known as the vine of death. It can cause vomiting and hours of hallucinations. But one doctor in the UK says it should be considered as a treatment for a wide range of mental health issues. Simon Mundy has been finding out more about this controversial drug.
These people have taken ayahuasca, one of the strongest psychedelic drugs in the world. Many backpackers have taken it in South America over the last few decades, but there are significantly more ayahuasca ceremonies being run in Europe now too. Although it is illegal here and can be dangerous, one doctor thinks it should be researched as a possible treatment for things like depression and PTSD.
As a medical doctor and a research scientist, what I'm asking for is that we do this research, we carry out these studies, and we demonstrate whether these drugs, ayahuasca, can be used as a treatment to reduce distress and pain for mental health patients. If we can show that ayahuasca works and can be used safely, it's absolutely ethical that we develop this as a medicine.
Ayahuasca is a potent hallucinogenic brew that's been used by shamans or healers in the Amazon for centuries for medical and spiritual purposes. Drinking ayahuasca can make you physically sick, but that's not the only thing you need to be wary of. It can be a psychologically traumatic experience.
There's very little recreational joy or hedonism to be had from ayahuasca. It's a difficult experience. It's a physically difficult, painful experience. Purging, vomiting, diarrhea, all of these things can happen. And it's a very intense psychological experience.
Laws on ayahuasca vary and are sometimes fuzzy. According to the Ayahuasca Defense Fund, it is legal in Peru, illegal in Canada, illegal for everyone in the US apart from 2 religious organisations, and appears to be caught by prohibitive legislation in the UK by the new Psychoactive Substances Act, which came into force last year, and the fact it contains DMT, which is listed as a Class A drug. In recent years, the use of ayahuasca has increasingly spread from South America into Europe. Ayahuasca's active ingredient is N,N-dimethyltryptamine, an extremely powerful hallucinogen. Normally, the DMT in the tea would be destroyed in the digestive system by a chemical called monoamine oxidase, but by adding a second plant containing a monoamine oxidase inhibitor, an MAOI, the DMT survives the digestive process and reaches the brain, where it alters the person's state of consciousness. A trip can last anything up to 8 hours. John lives in London and took part in an ayahuasca ceremony on the continent that he says changed his life.
Over the years, I've done a lot of work on myself. I've done various forms of therapy. I've had some sort of childhood issues that I've been dealing with as I was growing up, and as an adult I've been sorting them out. So I've done various other things, traditional therapies, and then I was doing some research online, and I read about ayahuasca and read about the amazing benefits and how it can be like, 10 years of therapy in a weekend or in one night, and I was really keen to try it. The ceremony I went to, it's in the middle of the Netherlands in like a rural sort of farm area. So it's very peaceful, it's out in nature. They like people to dress in white or light colours, so everybody's sort of in a sort of uniform colour. And then you take the ayahuasca, and it's drunk in like a shot, very sort of small amount of that you drink. It takes anywhere from 10 minutes to an hour to come on. The ceremony is like this epic 8-hour journey. I mean, it really is, it's a journey. It was like night and day. It was self-esteem and how I feel about myself on a daily basis. And it literally, after that ceremony, it was a dramatic change that I would notice on a daily basis. And if before, let's say before the ceremony, my self-esteem was at 10%, after the ceremony it was 90 or 100%. And it was that dramatic.
So there are clearly people who, like John, claim ayahuasca has been beneficial for them, but others have taken it and have had terrifying experiences and violent reactions, and there have even been reports of ayahuasca-related deaths. So if we just chat about... In 2014, Dave travelled abroad to an ayahuasca ceremony with a friend of his called Sam, who killed himself a few months later.
He had his life together, he had a girlfriend, he'd moved in with her, they just got a dog together. On the surface, he was someone that you were proud to hang around with. It was a small ceremonial hall, and you have little mattresses, so you all sleep in there together, and he was actually laid right next to me on a mattress on the floor. And the thing was, he spent the whole time there laughing.
So how was Sam when you came back from the ceremony? Was there any indication at all that there was anything wrong?
Absolutely not. Like, on the surface, man, he was cool, had his act together, completely, like, all he did was talk about what a great time he had. Like, he was, like, he posted on Facebook and stuff about how, it was this incredible life-changing transformation he'd had. He showed no signs for like 2 months after the ceremony. There was no signs that anything was wrong. It had opened Pandora's box to an extent. It had brought to the surface things that he's been carrying his whole life, and he didn't have the support to deal with this or to integrate this emotion into his life. And I think that's why he decided to kill himself.
So you are sure in your mind that the ayahuasca contributed to it?
I think that had he not taken it, would Sam still be here? Probably yes. Probably yes.
I wouldn't say I'm in the minority within medicine.
So if ayahuasca is dangerous and it is illegal, why is this doctor calling for it to be researched as a potential tool to help people with mental illness?
There's been a relative lack of what we'd call double-blind, placebo-controlled studies, but there has been one, quite interesting one, fairly recently. It's not yet published, it's just been finished in Brazil, looking at treatment with ayahuasca for depression. And it's demonstrated a very positive, significant effect at rapidly treating depression in people with severe treatment-resistant depression.
We've spoken to someone who took ayahuasca and with a friend of his, and a couple of months later his friend killed himself. And the guy we spoke to is firmly of the opinion that the ayahuasca contributed to his death. So on that basis, surely that shows it is dangerous and it needs to be still very strongly regulated.
Absolutely, things need to be regulated that are potentially dangerous. But there's a difference between regulation and prohibition. It's terribly sad to hear about instances of risk or harm and death that have occurred with ayahuasca or other chemicals like this. What I would say is we need to find a way to make these as safe as possible, because to throw the baby out with the bathwater and say they have no uses unless they're 100% safe is just not good science.
You mentioned that you've really noticed the interest in things like ayahuasca surging in recent years. A quick look on the internet shows that there are lots of places you can go now in Europe, not just in the Amazon, but in Europe, where they have these retreats that you can go and drink ayahuasca for a weekend and then come back. What's your view then of people self-treating, if you like, by going to places like this and come back? That sounds extremely risky.
The studies we've been designing involve not just taking the drug, but many weeks of follow-up afterwards in which you can integrate the drug experience, get support for any of the difficult material that may have emerged during the drug experience. And that is not only safer, but that's much more effective. When you look at when people have bad experiences with hallucinogens or psychedelics, LSD or whatever, when they take them recreationally, it's usually not just the experience itself, which is all over within a few hours, but it's the weeks, days, maybe months later.
Simon Mundy with that report, and we will be discussing the drug a little later in the programme. Coming up, armoured vehicles designed to protect British troops in Iraq and Afghanistan have been breaking down. We'll hear from a former commander of British forces.